How's it going? Thad Brown here with you on the Endgame. It is Monday, May the 4th. Yes, May the 4th be with you. I'm one of them. I'm one of those people. I did watch my Triumph, the Insult Comment Dog video today, which is a must on May the 4th. I'll make sure to share it a little later on my X feed. If you haven't seen it, whether you're a Star Wars fan or not, you will love it. You'll probably love it more if you're not a Star Wars fan. Either way, highly recommend it. We will talk sports today. The Sabres on to round 2, how they match up with the Canadians. Brandon Beane has a superpower, but is it really all him? We'll get into that. And of course, Rachel Liebert will be along for You See This, talk about the weekend. Speaking of the weekend, we are red and white in the studio today for my Philadelphia 76ers, who pulled off one of the best upsets in NBA playoff history. And it's not the most amazing thing ever because it's round 1. But if you really break down in terms of odds, likelihood, the way the series was, 3-1 Boston lead, the histories of those two teams playoff-wise, it is one of the more ridiculous outcomes that it was Philadelphia who advanced and not the Celtics. I know Jason Tatum was hurt, et cetera, et cetera. Regardless, I'm fired up, looking forward to Knicks Sixers, which starts tonight. We will talk a little more of that series later on in the show. But like I said, let's start with the Sabres, who are the hot thing in Western New York sports right now. It is Montreal who will face Buffalo in round number 2. First, I haven't been on since Thursday. I did talk on Thursday that I thought the most likely scenario for the last couple games of that Sabres series is that Buffalo would come out on top. It only took them one game, not a surprise. Buffalo was the better team. They played like the better team for the majority of the series, not the first 2 games at home. And really, all 3 games at home were not spectacular, but they were so good on the road. It left no doubt that they belonged in round 2 and Boston did not. I know Buffalo fans reveled in knocking a Boston team out of the playoffs, but really, I think once Buffalo stole that first game, there was really little chance the Bruins were going to come back and really make it a threat, and they did not. So now it's Montreal in round 2. Fascinating matchup for a lot of different ways. Number 1, remember, let's go back to the regular season. Buffalo, Tampa, Montreal, that division was ridiculous all year. And the Sabres winning the division, it was thought that whoever won that Atlantic division would get the benefit of avoiding a rock fight in round number 1, a absolute knockdown, drag-out series, and that is what happened. Buffalo got done in 6 games. They haven't played a hockey game since Friday, whereas Montreal, who's going to have to show up for game 1 on Wednesday, had to play on Sunday. So the Sabres have a couple extra days rest. They will be home, obviously, for the first 2 games as the higher seed. Not only, by the way, did Montreal have to play 7 games with Tampa, but 4 of those games went overtime. So they played the equivalent of 25 more minutes of hockey. So that wasn't just a 7-game series. That was a 7.5-game series that Montreal just played. Now, when you break these 2 teams down in the regular season, they met 4 times. Each team won 2. Each team also won a game on the road. All 4 games were decided by 2 goals. All 4 games were 2 goals because they ended with empty netters. So basically, these 2 teams played 4 times, and they were all 1-goal games. The final score was 2, but essentially it was a 1-goal game all 4 times. Total goals in the 4 games, even 13-13. In the regular season as a total, the Sabres had 3 more points and 2 more wins. So while Buffalo's the 1 seed and Montreal is the 3, this is still a really, really tight series. Now, of those 4 games, 1 was played BC, which is before comeback, before turnaround, and then the other 3 were played afterward. In other words, the first game of the year was in October. All 3 games after, they actually played the other 3 games in like a 2-week stretch in January. Buffalo lost the 1, as you might imagine, early in the year, and won 2 of 3 later in the year. Now, does that mean that Montreal is inferior to the new Sabres? I just think they played 3 games and not 4. And the way this series has played out so far, I think if it had gone 4, or they had played a 4th game afterward, Montreal probably would have won it, and we'd be looking at a series of 4 games that were split down the middle. You look at who the Canadians have been, they're not quite as deep as the Sabres. Who is? They do have, I think, a better talent combo on top in Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki. Not by a lot, just a little bit. This isn't, Connor McDavid and Draisaitl or something like that. But I think Montreal at the very top is a little more talented than the Sabres. Sabres are deeper, as I think they're going to be in just about every series they play. To me, the biggest, I don't want to say X factor, but the thing that I'm really looking at in this series is going to be goaltending, which shocking in a NHL playoff series. It's how it goes a lot of the time. But with Montreal in particular, Jakob Dobes was the guy who played the first round series against Tampa. Jakob Dobes in the regular season was nothing to write home about. This is a guy who was a bottom quarter of the league goalie at best, statistically. Played a whole lot better against the Lightning. Montreal did not allow 4 goals in any game in that 7-game playoff series in the first round. They only allowed 3 2 times. And all of Dobes' numbers were a heck of a lot better in the 7-game playoff series against Tampa than they were in the regular season. He's a second-year player. He's a young guy. In fact, the backup goalie for Montreal is a rookie, so they're really young between the pipes. So whether or not Dobes continues to play at that level, I think is absolutely X factor number one. Because if the Sabres see the goalie who played against Tampa, it's going to be Jeremy Swayman all over again, where you've got someone you've got to figure out in net on the other side. I don't think Dobes is, Connor Hellebuck stealing series, but he was pretty darn good in the series against Tampa. And if he continues to play at that level, it's going to be a problem for the Sabres. On top of that, it was interesting to note that Dobes only played the Sabres 2 times in the regular season, and those were the 2 Montreal wins. So Buffalo is 0-2 against Dobes and 2-0 against, I didn't see who the other goalie was who played. Montreal had 3 different guys in net this year at different times during the regular season, same as the Sabres. But the Sabres have not beaten the goalie they're about to see in this best-of-7 series. I think they will find a way to win at least one of these games. I'd be stunned if Montreal won this in a sweep. But it is possible that Dobes is good enough, or Dobes is just a matchup that the Sabres might have a problem with. The other thing about this series for the Sabres, and this is not going to just be this series, but can Buffalo play better at home? We just talked about how in the first round, the Sabres looked wildly better in Boston than they were at home. They really should have lost all 3 games that were played at home. Obviously, like we said, they stole the first one after being down 2-0 with less than 10 minutes to play. One of the all-time NHL comebacks. I mean, historic in terms of how late it was in the game when Buffalo rallied from 2 goals down to win in regulation. I've thought for the last couple weeks, as the Sabres continue to just not play great at home. And look, in Game 5, they weren't terrible. I thought Boston played a little better, but I thought the Sabres were good. They were not good in Game 2, and they were not good for 50 minutes of Game 1. And I think what the issue is, or the theory I have, the hypothesis I have, is that Buffalo is so dialed in to the Sabres being good and providing hope, and the first playoff run in almost a decade and a half, the first playoff series win in nearly 2 decades. Everyone is so geeked up in Western New York. It's everywhere. People are playing hockey. You see Sabres gear, flags, bumper stickers, jerseys, everything. It's impossible for the players to miss it. If you were in the building at all for Game 1 and remember the sound that building made when Matthias Samuelsson scored the go-ahead goal, you know in full detail what Western New York feels about this Sabres run. And I don't know if it's so much pressure. I do think the Sabres want to live up to the hype. Why wouldn't they? They feel the energy. They feel the excitement. They want to perform. They want to not just put on a show, but win for this fan base that's been so starved for playoff hockey. And I think there's more of a burden on this team at home to play that way. The team that's gone up to Boston, I think, largely has played pretty free. The Bruins did a good job in mucking up games 3 and 6 and making them a bit of a challenge. But I think when Buffalo's away from home, they just play like they've played all year, which is deep and smart. And obviously the Josh Doan play, which led to the games and series sealing goal by Zach Benson, more of a hustle play than a freedom of mind play. But I do think there's something to the idea that the Sabres just have a little less on their plate, a little less on their shoulders when they're not playing a key bank center. And you can get away with that earlier in the playoffs, obviously, because the deeper Buffalo goes, the more difficult the opposition is. Boston was not a bad team. It's not like the Sabres went 6 with some team that barely squeaked in that was marginally over 500. Bruins were a good team. The Canadiens are only 6 points better than Boston was in terms of a regular season matchup. So surviving Boston with that style of play doesn't mean the Sabres got to be wildly better to get past Montreal. But at some point in the next 3 rounds, you can't have the 3 home games that Buffalo had in round 1. At some point, you've got to be better. You've got to be able to put together what you've been doing on the road for more than just those road games. You're going to play 7. You got to be good for 5 or 6 of them if you're going to get past teams like Carolina and Colorado who are yet to lose in the playoffs. So can Buffalo in this series against Montreal be a little more composed, if you're going to follow my theory? A little more what they've been the regular season, a little more play within themselves a little better. Not a lot, but a little. Because again, if game 1 against Boston goes the way it should have, or if they put together 3 games at home in this round like they did against Boston, there's a better chance they lose all 3. And I know how good the Sabres have been on the road, and credit to them for that, but expecting Buffalo to go and sweep 3 more games on the road might be a little too much to ask, even if road teams in the NHL have been kind of ridiculously good. For example, Montreal and Tampa, Buffalo and Boston, so the 2 playoff series involving Atlantic Division teams, road teams went 10-3. So it isn't just Buffalo who succeeded on the road. Montreal comes into this series having won 3 playoff road games of their own already. They're 3-1 because they had to play 4 on the road, but either way, both teams are going to walk into round 2 with 3 road wins. Both teams are going to walk into round 2 feeling very comfortable playing in somebody else's building. I still think it's hard not to like the Sabres. Again, the goalie situations on both sides are a little similar to where you like the guy your team is playing, but you're probably not fully confident in their ability to go through a playoff. I think the Sabres are in a little better shape because if Alex Lyon falters at all, you can go back to Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and you still feel like somewhere in there is an elite number 1 goalie. I don't know if Montreal feels the same about their backup, who's a rookie. But either way, both goalies that were pretty darn good in round 1. Both teams are going to walk into the second round with plenty of confidence in each guy. I think the Sabres, though, are deeper. Sabres obviously have home ice advantage. Not that that seems to be worth much these days. I think it'll be a close series. I think it at least goes 6. But I think Buffalo has enough to get past Montreal. To me, I thought the roadblocks to a Sabres Stanley Cup were not in the Atlantic Division. I will say that I think the better team, the more dangerous team, won that Montreal-Tampa series. It felt like the Lightning have been kind of leaking oil since Valentine's Day almost. It hasn't been the same team that was, I think, more dominant early in the year. And I think Montreal would be the tougher out in the postseason, and through one round, that has proven to be the case. Whether that's the case against the Sabres remains to be seen. I'd be stunned if this series didn't go at least 6, like I said. But I think Buffalo's a deeper team. I think Buffalo, I don't want to say they're riding the better momentum, but I just, with the energy they have at home, the energy from the fans, everybody, how wildly excited everyone is, I think Buffalo is the pick in this series. But it wouldn't stun me if Montreal makes it really hard. And again, these first 2 games at home, as much as the road teams have succeeded so far in this postseason, you almost think it's not necessarily on Montreal to get a split. The Sabres got to at least get one of the two. And I know it's weird to think about not wanting to win both games at home. Obviously, Buffalo wants to do that. But if they split the two games at home and it's 1-1, I feel fine about Buffalo. I'm not worried about Buffalo until they get down more than 1-0 or until we get to Game 7. The way this postseason has gone, Game 7 in Buffalo, based on how amped up the fans are and how much the players seem to feel it and how much of a weight that is they're seeming to carry, that would make me nervous if I'm a Sabres fan. But they've been good enough so far that there's enough reason to believe they can at least pick off one or two of the early games at home and win a bunch on the road. Because when this Sabres team just plays like they've been all year and plays free, they are damn tough to beat, as you saw in the first series against Boston. So looking forward to this one. I think Buffalo's the better team. I think Buffalo's the deeper team, but Montreal is plenty good enough to steal this series. You think about the regular season. Like I said, they were 3 points. They were 2 wins apart. Buffalo won 50 games. Montreal won 48. The other reason why I might doubt Montreal a little bit, of their 48 wins, they had 10 in overtime. Sabres only had 3. So we're not playing 3-on-3 hockey anymore. And Montreal had a 10-3 advantage over Buffalo in that one category. Otherwise, these teams were pretty close up and down the statistical breakdown. Goals for, goals against, goal differential, relatively in the same category. Sabres were a little better, but these teams were pretty close. Sabres just did a better job winning games in regulation. Montreal won more in overtime. But should be fun. Can't wait for Game 1 on Wednesday. Kind of weird, by the way, too, that the Carolina-Philly series, they're playing Game 2 tonight on a Monday, and the Sabres and Canadians don't start until Wednesday. I haven't looked at the Philly Carolina series. I'm assuming they're just going to stretch it out so that when we get to games 5, 6, and 7, things are a little closer. But still kind of weird that we're going to be 2 games in the other Eastern Conference semifinal before Buffalo, 2 days before Buffalo and Montreal even start. All right, let's go to the Bills now, because I had a couple more draft thoughts. The more you think about this draft, you try and look at different trends and things that stand out. And one thing that I've been thinking about is we all joked after the draft happened that, well, of course Brandon Beane did good stuff in rounds 4, 5, and 6. When does he not do that? He's always the guy who makes good with late round day 3 picks. And I wondered if maybe we're making a little too much of an assumption with putting that success on Brandon Beane. Now, if you go through all the different day 3 successes, it actually is about a 50-50 split between guys that worked on offense and guys that worked on defense. In terms of rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7, and I'm going to, when I do this list, I'm going to kind of make it relative to the round that's being picked in terms of what we're calling a success, okay? But offensive successes under Brandon Beane for those late round picks, those day 3 picks, Jackson Hawes, and I know it's one year in, but he looks like a pretty safe bet to be a success. Ray Davis and Gabe Davis, kind of weird. Khalil Shakir, huge hit for sure. And then 3 guys who actually did more away from the Bills than they did in Buffalo, but Isaiah Hodgins, Wyatt Teller, and Ray McLeod are all day 3 offensive players who were very successful, especially relative to the round they were picked. The defensive guys who were good for Brandon Beane. Deion Walker, again, we're 1 year in, but I feel pretty safe calling that one a hit. Christian Benford, wildly good, obviously. Balin Spector, I might be reaching a little bit, but this is a 7th-round pick who's played almost 40 games in the NFL. That's a success for sure. DeMar Hamlin, Dane Jackson, Taron Johnson, another big one, and Saran Neal, who was a 5th-round pick. I know a lot of special teams there, but a guy who's played 100 games in the NFL. The reason I bring all this up is because when you look at what Brandon Beane has done with Sean McDermott, when they were the combo, the only position group that really stands out in terms of being a success, and wide receiver is a close second here, is defensive back. Because you look at the guys who have succeeded in those late picks, those day 3 picks, and you've got 5 of them who were defensive backs. Damar Hamlin, Dane Jackson, Taron Johnson, Saran Neal, Christian Benford. Those are all day 3 defensive back success stories. And on offense, you've got 4 receivers. Again, 2 of them, Ray McLeod and Isaiah Hodgins. McLeod especially was better away from Buffalo. Hodgins is about 50-50. And then Gabe Davis and Khalil Shakir. Shakir and Davis have been very solid, not great. Shakir obviously a little better than Gabe, but very solid, accomplished players you got on day 3. On defense, though, Christian Benford and Taron Johnson are all pro level guys. So not only is the number of successes at defensive back larger than any other position, you also have arguably your 2 best, maybe not even arguably, your 2 best day 3 success stories are defensive backs, Taron Johnson and Christian Benford. If you want to put on top of that the undrafted free agent success stories, well, you can add in Levi Wallace, Cam Lewis, and Jamarcus Ingram, who again is going to be on this list with success relative to where he was drafted. Now, the Bills did have offensive undrafted success stories. Ryan Bates, Ryan Vandermark, Alec Anderson has a potential to be a really big hit if he becomes the starter at left guard on a very successful offensive line. Terrell Shavers, again, relative to being an undrafted free agent, has been a success. And Jay Kumaro, to a degree, even though the Bills brought him in essentially from Green Bay. Regardless, though, I've got 5 drafted defensive backs from day 3 who have worked with the Bills, on top of 3 undrafted players who have been different levels of good. Levi Wallace was a starter for multiple years. Cam Lewis turned himself into a very valuable utility piece. And then Jamarcus Ingram, who was functional, and again, for an undrafted free agent, that's a win. Can't be a coincidence that the head coach during that time was a former safety, a former defensive back himself. I know a lot of the time we put draft successes on the scouting staff, the general manager, but you can't separate that success from what the coaches did. The GM and the coaches work together on these things in a lot of ways. The GM and the coach discuss who would work in a system, what makes sense for what the coach wants to do. And the longer a GM and a head coach work together, the more likely the GM is to know what the head coach is looking for and what works for them. So it would make sense that Brandon Beane in year 5, 6, 7, 8 would have a better understanding of who to draft for what works for Sean McDermott. Now, defensive backs for sure are not perfect under Sean McDermott. Kyer Elam was a big-time bust as a first-round pick. But if you look at the number of times Brandon Beane's superpower drafting on day 3 has been a defensive back that you have to admit or allow for credit for the coaching staff led by Sean McDermott coaching that player up into something that works, I think it's fair to wonder then how much of what Brandon Beane has done on day 3 is all Brandon Beane. Now, even if you take out the defensive backs, like I said, you've still got success stories in there. Khalil Shakir, Gabe Davis, for sure. Deion Walker, defensive line. Another guy who looks like a pretty solid play. Wyatt Teller, not for the Bills, but was a good player in the NFL. So this doesn't mean also that Brandon Beane is going to be totally clueless drafting on day 3 without Sean McDermott. But the amount of success that the Bills have had with day 3 picks that were defensive backs, that was what we think was Sean McDermott's specialty, I think certainly lends to some caution when it comes to just assuming that Brandon Beane on day 3 is going to be money again. Because there's now a new coaching staff. A new coaching staff, a new combo, between the head coach and the GM, and in this case, the defensive coordinator and the GM, is going to lead to new results. It might not even be worse. It could be better. But just because Brandon Beane hit on all those defensive backs in day 3 and after the draft with Sean McDermott doesn't mean the same thing is going to happen with the new coaching staff. And maybe Joe Brady has a different specialty that works. Maybe for him, it's going to be more wide receivers. Maybe Skylar Bell is going to have the secret Brandon Beane sauce for day 3. Or maybe it'll be defensive line. Maybe it'll be Zane Durant. That becomes a special player for the Bills on day 3. But without Sean McDermott, assuming that Brandon Beane and all those defensive back day 3 successes are going to just go down the same road again, I think it's something we got to pump the brakes on a little bit, because the coaching staff, like I said, deserves an amount of credit for grooming and teaching and coaching those players into what they became after they were identified and selected by Brandon Beane and the scouting staff. It's a relationship. It's a combination of brains that come together to make those players work. And the fact that there were so many in the defensive secondary that worked late on day 3 and as undrafted free agents tells you that, again, a good chunk of that credit is probably from Sean McDermott. One of the reasons I want to bring that up, too, is because you look at what the Bills did in the offseason in terms of retooling this defense. A lot of these guys were older free agents. D. Alford, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Bradley Chubb, Geno Stone. Good chunk of these guys, I mean, those are all third contract guys. These are not second round or second contract players. These are not players that I think the Bills are intending to grow with the new coordinator, to grow with a new defense. This doesn't seem like a long-term build for this defense. If you wanted to think bigger picture, longer term, I think the Bills would have gone with more second contract guys, younger guys who might not have the same resume of success that certainly are Bradley Chubb, but even to a lesser degree as C.J. Gardner-Johnson have had in the NFL. But guys who have more long-term upside, players that you can grow with what Jim Leonhard wants to do. And it doesn't mean that there isn't a long-term plan, but I think that what the Bills wanted to do, when you start looking at everything they did in free agency, and then on top of that, even in the draft, TJ Parker's a solid pick, but their second pick is a guy who's a backup. And I know Brandon Beane explained why that is, and I understand the reason, and it certainly makes some sense that you want to make sure you're covered at that position. And we talked on Thursday about how the Bills didn't have a whole lot of other options when it comes to making the third cornerback position better. If they weren't going to spend a high draft pick, there really wasn't anything great in free agency. And if they weren't going to spend that particular draft pick, there wasn't a whole lot of corners that were going to be available later on in the draft. And there weren't really even great options for them in the draft that were a better choice than Davison Igbinosun. So it made sense to go get a corner in round 2. But at the end of the day, this is still not a guy who's projected to be a starter. So when you look at this defense, they're going to be littered with older players, veteran guys. There probably will be only 3 guys on the starting defense who are going to be on rookie contracts. Deion Walker, Cole Bishop, and assumably Max Harrison. If it's not him, it's going to be Igbinosun. So basically whoever corner 2 is. Other than that, the rest of these guys are all second and third contract guys. These are older guys. And I think what that tells you is this is a team that is planning to win right now. There's not going to be a long-term wait. And I'm not breaking any news here. This is a Bills team that's been chasing this year for pretty much the last 4 or 5 years. The Bills, and many of their fans have pointed this out, you don't want to waste prime Josh Allen years. I think it's fair to believe that there's a lot of those years left to go. Even if Josh Allen is not going to be elite as a runner for 5, 6, 7 years, the passing stuff and the scrambling stuff should be good enough that you're going to get a top 3, 4, 5 quarterback well past 2030. But that doesn't mean the Bills obviously want to back off on a prime year, on a a year where Josh Allen is already number 1 or number 2 in the NFL, and I think right now he's number 1. I understand wanting to cash in on that. Doesn't mean that you have to do what the Bills did. They easily could have gone younger guys. They could have gone out and found there were 4 or 5 edges who were going into a second contract who weren't great, who weren't superstars, but were guys that you could put into a new defense and they could grow with a longer term build. Bills elected not to go that way. They elected to bring in guys that should work right now. You know, if you wanted to go with one of those edges, yeah, they might figure things out. They might get better. They might work in your system. But the Bills know exactly what D. Alford is going to be. The Bills know exactly what C.J. Gardner-Johnson is going to be. They know exactly what Bradley Chubb is going to be. This defense is built to succeed right now. And I know many fans will be fine with that, and I totally get that plan. I don't know if it's better or worse, because you could have gone younger and maybe had a better build when it comes to what Jim Leonhard wants to do by picking guys that you might be able to mold a little more. I think it's hard, even with grabbing various free agents, to just build a brand new defense in 1 year. Especially, again, when you're a team like the Bills, who has a big-time quarterback contract, and you're trying to make do with limited cap space. Doesn't mean it can't work. I just think that it's interesting that the Bills have chosen, they could have gone, again, younger, more long-term trajectory, and instead said, we're going to grab this 30-year-old, this 30-year-old, this 30-year-old. They're not all 30, but to make the point. Because we know exactly what D. Alford's going to help our defense with. We know exactly how Bradley Chubb makes us better. We know exactly, assuming his head stays screwed on straight, what C.J. Gardner-Johnson is going to do for our defense. Again, it doesn't make it wrong. It just is a unique point of view. Or maybe not unique, but it is the way that the Bills have chosen to go. This is a defense built to win right this second. I know that they did draft a couple rookies later on in the draft with Caleb Alarms-Orr and Jalen Kilgore, who could figure into what this team is going to be. But if you're counting on a low 4th and a low 5th round pick to be impactful year one, then you're asking for a problem. So while I'm very intrigued, like anybody else is, especially with Kilgore, about what those two guys could be and how they might fit into the defense, the most likely scenario is that those two guys are special teamers, assuming there aren't injury issues at their respective positions. I mean, Kilgore right now he's going to start at safety. He's the 4th safety. He's not on the field unless you have some unique substitution or unique defensive package for him, specialized package for him, or there's 2 injuries. Alarms-Orr has a better shot to start right now because there's not that many bodies in front of him at linebacker. He's a 4th round pick too, which I'm sure helps. But I don't think these 2 guys are likely to figure into what this defense is going to be. This is a defense that's going to be built by older 2nd, 3rd contract guys. And I think we should also acknowledge that this may not be a choice made in a vacuum. When people talk about schemes and plans and what different teams want to do with each side of the ball, I think the conversation is all seems to be framed in, well, they could be this, as if anything is available, as if you can go to Amazon and just, I'd like a 2-gapping nose tackle and a wildly bendy athletic edge. Oh, thank you very much. Shipping and handling is free because I'm a part of Amazon Prime. That's not how it works. Every team is limited by what is available. So the Bills may not have decided this is what we want to be because we can't waste Josh Allen's prime, or this is a team that's built to win now, or we can figure it out in 1 year because all these veterans are going to work for us. They may have decided that this was the best choice they had based on what's available. Now, like I said, there were free agents, whether it's DJ Reader or the Joe Asai's of the world, who could have fit a more traditional 3-4 build if the Bills elected to go that way. The Bills did spend a bunch of money on DJ Moore and Bradley Chubb. So already a large chunk of resources were spent on those premium positions, which would be valuable no matter who was coaching the defense. So that may have further hamstrung the choices the Bills had. But no matter how they got there, they have landed on a defense that is full of guys that are certainties, There's not upside for the most part. But like I said, you know what D. Alford's going to be. You know what C.J. Gardner-Johnson's going to be. You know what Geno Stone and Bradley Chubb are going to be. They've been in the league, all four of those guys, for a long time. And you haven't added a whole lot in the draft that you feel like should figure into this team year one. Does it make it right or wrong? No, I don't know. We'll find out. But this is the choice the Bills have made. They're going to give a veteran defense to Jim Leonard and say, go win right now. They could have, like I said, gone a little younger, maybe drafted more players who were ready to start right away. And again, that probably would involve not trading for DJ Moore, which is a whole different discussion. But there was a different path. They could have gone younger. They could have gone with a slower, perhaps more thorough defensive change, defensive transformation, and given Jim Leonard 2 or 3 years to make this work. Instead, it seems like what they've done and said, we're going to figure it out right now. We're going to go out and get you the older guys you need that we know how they're going to fit, and you go build us a defense that can win a championship right now. And it could easily work. It could easily work. Because when you have Josh Allen, you don't need a ton to go right for you around him to win a championship. Maybe more than we've expected or believed the last few years. I think, if anything, the last 5-6 years have taught us is that whatever the level is you think the Bills need to win a championship with Josh Allen, it's probably more. But the Bills don't have to hit on every spot on the defense. Just, I think what the plan is, give Jim Leonard guys that you know what they can do. You know how they will fit. You know what their strengths and weaknesses are in the NFL. And go make that work right away, even if probably you're limiting the upside by forcing your defensive coordinator to make this change in 1 year and by not giving him a ton of young assets that in theory should have a higher ceiling. Like I said, not right or wrong, just the choice the Bills have made. All right, let's take a break. When we come back here, I want to talk a little bit about Live Golf, which remains in the news because it's probably on death's doorstep here. I'll try to talk a little bit about why it went wrong. And Rachel Liebert is in. We'll talk about some of the weird, unusual things that went on in the world of sports over the weekend. I'm Thad Brown. This is Rock One, or at least that's what the cool kids call it. You're watching The Endgame, and we're back right after a break. Thad Brown back here with you on The Endgame. Want to remind you once again, tonight at 8:30, as we always do on Monday and Thursday, it is BKL Nightly. Rachel Liebert, Caleb Carl be in. We're going to talk about Bills v. Patriots after the draft and free agency is over. Which team is the better team? And basically, have the Bills run down the Patriots. I know it's weird to think about, but the Patriots did win the division last year. So did the Bills catch the Patriots? We will talk about that 8:30 tonight right here on Rochester First. You may have heard that the funding for Live Golf is gone, at least the Saudis, the PIF, private investment firm, I think it's fund actually, announced that they will no longer fund the Live Tour. So Live is going to have to go out there and be a sports league like everybody else and find funding through various sources and attract viewers and get people to pay because they like the product. And it's going to be pretty darn tough because there aren't a whole lot of people that like the product for a number of reasons. And the one that's always bothered me about Live Golf is it's almost like they tried to make golf cool. As if this was golf in the 1980s where guys are overweight and wearing plaid pants and are among like it's Caddyshack, to where you make fun of guys who show up and play golf. I do remember when I was a teenager that there were times, I love golf. My grandparents loved it, got me into it when I was real little. But I can remember playing golf and thinking to myself, I hope none of my friends see me because this is not cool. Well, what happened was Tiger Woods came along and he made golf cool in a lot of ways by himself. But just because of how good and how much a phenomenon he was. So golf has been cool for a while. Golf didn't need LIV to make it cool. I think the slogan for LIV was golf but louder. And that's the thing, it just made it louder. Yeah, I mean, have you ever heard of anything that's better when it's louder? You don't need anything to be louder. You need things to be loud enough. Just let me hear. Just let me take note of what's going on. The PGA Tour has been loud enough for sure since the arrival of Tiger Woods. So they didn't need LIV to make it any louder. And they certainly didn't need LIV to make it any cooler either. And I think it took the focus off the golf. LIV was trying to present a golf event as a party with music and dancers and all kinds of weird things happening away from the course. You do that when you're a minor league sport, right? You go to AAA baseball, you're not most of the time going to watch the baseball. You're going to watch the guys try and throw footballs through a basket 50 yards away to win $100 to the local steak shop, or to have a race where three-legged races, stuff like that, you're winning free tickets to the next game the next weekend. That's what leagues do when the product itself is not the number one reason most people go. Again, most people go to AAA baseball to have a hot dog and a beer, to be outside, and to laugh at the different promotions. The baseball's good. The baseball's fun. And you hope your team wins. You want to see a home run, catch a foul ball, and all that stuff. But the priority is not the product. And LIV acted like the sport was not the primary product. And I think that's a part of what hurt LIV Golf. If your product was good enough, and frankly, they had the names to make it good enough by itself, then just play golf. People will watch. You didn't need the team concept. You didn't need the 54-hole round. And I think that was done more as a nod to the players to say, hey, you come here, you don't have to work as much. You didn't need the shotgun format. Just play golf. Just play golf. And LIV didn't think that was the way to go. They wanted to be different. They wanted to bring you in with something beyond the golf, when the golf was already good enough. The PGA Tour had shown that. The players LIV had attracted were likely going to show that. The other thing that didn't help either is that I think it's seeming to be a trend, and I haven't studied it, but anecdotally, the guys who've gone to LIV have not gotten better as players. And you've heard stories about, I think it was Bryson DeChambeau a couple weeks ago, one of the last LIV events that existed, that may ever exist, complaining about the quality of different playing surfaces. The fairways and greens are fine. You get off those a little bit, and there's more trouble with the rough being consistent, where fans have walked, things like that. The quality of the courses wasn't great. And as Mark Schlabach recently pointed out on ESPN last week, when the LIV news was a little hotter and heavier, this is not how you get ready for a major, by playing the courses that LIV had to offer. So LIV had a product that they could have promoted. They had the golf. People wanted to watch golf. All you had to do was show good golf. But you tried to make it cooler. You tried to make it louder when golf was already cool enough, thanks to Tiger Woods, and already loud enough. And I think that's a big part of why this sport has failed so far. Now, it's succeeded more worldwide, but in America, we have not shown an interest or a desire to continue to follow this brand of golf. I think if LIV had just said, look, we've got all these big names, let's just play tournaments. You could have still played 54-hole tournaments, but just make it look like golf. Make the courses difficult. Make the groupings the same late. You didn't have to be wildly different to be successful. And I know part of the thing with LIV was that they wanted to thumb their nose in the PGA Tour's face, and you couldn't do it probably as well by looking a lot like the PGA Tour. They wanted to create change. They wanted to show why the PGA Tour was wrong. And in a lot of ways, they did exactly that. But I think they went too far trying to make sure that being different and looking different was the priority, as opposed to just giving a good product, providing the golf that people just wanted to see on their own. So it doesn't seem like we will be hearing or seeing much from Live Golf anytime soon. And I can't say I will ever miss it. I didn't watch much of it anyway. There was the Anthony Kim win, and the way he won might be the great moment in Live Golf history, which is fine. It was a really, really cool story. But why was it cool? Because it was a golf moment, not because of parties, not because of guys wearing shorts, not because of music. The golf was cool. That's why the Anthony Kim moment was cool as well. All right, Rachel Liebert is here. It is time once again to do what we do every Monday, where we look back at the weekend in sports and say, what caught our eye? What was weird? What was unusual? What was the thing that you wake up in the morning and you say to your friend, you see this? And this week, I have never had two stories for us that were more easily predictable in terms of what they were. I know you may not know mine, but I think you'll recognize it.
I might.
You might, yeah. But anyway, you will go first because yours was by far the more important. Yes, exactly.
Maybe the story of
probably
the
story
weekend.
of the whole weekend. Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, the Kentucky Derby was around the 152nd Kentucky Derby, and a lot of stories, came out of this one. The horse that won, Golden Tempo, won the Kentucky Derby. I don't know. I'm sure you saw the finish of it.
I watched the whole race. Had way too much money on it, but I watched it, yeah.
From basically coming from last place all the way up into the front. So that by itself was just a great story to watch. But then you find out who the trainer is, and it's a woman named Sherry DeVoe. She was the first female trainer to ever win the Kentucky Derby, which is surprising that it's taken 152 Kentucky Derbies to get to this point. Only 19 starters in Derby history have been trained by women. So I guess that kind of narrows the field a little bit as to what I just said. But the closest a woman has ever come to winning previously was actually 1992.
Wow.
It was with a trainer named Shelley Riley. She came in second. So it's been quite some time since a woman has even, been close. And then for her to win it and win it in the fashion that her horse won it is just unbelievable. And then on top of it too, the trainer, his name is Jose Ortiz. He ended up passing his brother from kind of
the jockey. You mean?
The jockey. The jockey ended up passing his brother for the win. And then I don't know if you saw the iconic photo that kind of came out of it of them fist bumping in the end. So just a lot of cool stuff. And watching this, I don't know if you saw too the video of her watching.
Oh my! Of course, I've watched that. Yes,
watching her horse win. I mean, it's just one of those stories that you don't even realize. It's really not even on your radar, and then it happens, and it's just wow, it took, first of all, this long to even get to this point, and second of all, just an incredible story all around with the finish, and then the trainer, and then the jockey. It's just kind of one of those stories that could be made into a movie, I think. So,
number one, for anybody who has not seen the video of Sherry watching her horse win, go find it. It is better than you could possibly expect. Number two, you said the highest female trainer finish at a Derby was second place in 1992.
Yep.
Do you know if there been a number of top 5s, top 10 since?
I am not sure.
Obviously, you said there are only 19 total, so it's not a lot, but I don't know if you looked that up at all.
No, I'm not positive. I will have to look that up, but I know that like I said, the closest one that's come to winning is second, and that's 1992, so it's been quite some time. But
the one wet blanket moment I'm going to have for this is, I know people were excited about the horse coming from last place to win. The thing about the Derby and the Belmont is that they're so long, they do lend themselves towards horses who close quickly.
Yeah.
So if you're ever watching those, the Preakness not so much because it's a shorter race. If you're watching the Kentucky Derby and let's say you have a couple of units on a horse, if your horse is winning halfway through, you're done.
Yeah.
Almost never that horse comes in first. So the idea of, the horse came from, they always come from, not necessarily last, but 14th, 15th, 16th, come from way back in the field to win. That happens every year. I would say, without knowing horse racing that well, I would say easily the winning horse of 90% of Kentucky Derbies at some point in the race, and not just 2 seconds after the start, at some point in the race, they were at least 10th place or first.
Yeah, it does feel like that. And I don't really pay much attention to the Kentucky Derby each year, except for when these finishes happen, and it tends to be like this. I just think, this horse, watching the video, like you said, this is what normally happens. They come from behind, but it seemed like this horse just kicked a whole other gear, went to the way, the complete outside, and then just to finish the way it did was it was cool to see.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
And like you said, way overdue.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. It took this long. The fact there's only been 19 horses, and my immediate reaction to that, to having only 19 horses in the Derby that were female trainers, was, oh, the first one must have been like 10 years ago. If we're going back 30 plus years, and I've only had 19, so you're talking about a span of 30 years. There's only one female trainer every other year, essentially.
Yeah.
That's a comment in and of itself. But it was cool to see her win. Even cooler to see how excited she was.
Yeah.
The one other thing I'll say too is the jockeys being cool about finishing 1-2. Like, I know they were, and it's awesome and everything.
Yeah.
But the dude who finished second, as someone who has a brother, that does not sit well at home. Like, you're going to hear about that at the dinner table for a while.
I know. I think his trainer or somebody like with his team made a comment to him when I was looking stuff up about how, like, you know, if you want to lose, I guess you lose to your brother. But dang, like, your brother beat you in the end. But like, yeah, would you feel better about it being your brother beating you, or like worse? Like, I don't know how I'd feel.
It'd definitely be both. In the grand scheme, you know, if someone said to you, who do you want to win the race? If it's not you, I want it to be my brother. But for all the moments you got to hang out, that's not who you want to win.
And it's your younger brother too.
Exactly, right.
Comes up from behind and beats you.
Trust me, as someone who's a younger brother, the comments would be endless about, oh yeah, you won the Kentucky 3/4 of the Derby. How'd that go? That kind of stuff like that, you know. So, but still, very, very cool story. All right, mine is totally personal and not relevant, not nearly as relevant. But let's go Sixers, everybody. Coming back from 3-1 down to knock off the Celtics. First time, by the way, in 33 tries or 33 situations where Boston has had a 3-1 lead where they have lost the series, which will be the thing I will always think about with this, because I remember seeing a graphic after Philly lost game 4 to go down 3-1 that I saw Boston is 32-0 and went up 3-1. I'm like, oh, that's over. I knew it was over anyway, but like, it was over. First time that Philly has come back in 19 times being down 3-1. Only the 15th time in NBA history that a team has come back from 3-1 by itself. And you would think that NBA would be the least likely rally sport. It's not like hockey where you can get a couple bounces or whatever. But in baseball actually has less 3-1 comebacks than basketball does. Oh, wow. Partly because baseball has less rounds of playoffs, but unless, you know, some of their rounds are not even 7 games. Regardless, I thought it would be more, to be honest. If anybody didn't watch Game 7, the Sixers were up most of the way. Boston came back. Everybody who's a Sixers fan was like, oh, here we go. Here comes the choke job. And Boston had a couple of good looks down 1 late, just happened to miss them all. And then Tyrese Maxey had a couple of big buckets. And in terms of larger Pantheon NBA discussions, I think a lot of people will tell you that Tyrese Maxey went from really good player to, wow, he might be able to be the guy kind of player with his performance. Either way, really cool for all of us Sixers fans. For all the years, especially lately, of playoff failures. I was watching that Toronto Raptors Game 6 win. I know you know about it as a Cavs fan. Where the ball bounces a mile in the air and goes in for the winner. And I immediately thought of Game 7 Sixers Toronto, where Kawhi makes the triple bouncer to win. That was the Philly playoff history, right? This is what we've been saddled with. And finally, the Sixers get a win in a big series. Rachel, I've been a Sixers fan for 40 plus years. Next to Allen Iverson taking that team to the championship, this is probably my number 2 Sixers moment.
Really?
Which is sad. It was a round 1 series. This is the number 2 moment.
This Sixers team, I'm surprised. They're what, a 7 seed?
Yeah.
I haven't paid attention to the Sixers really all year, but I watched this game and I
that
was
hurts,
like,
hurts just for you to say, by the way. That's okay.
I watched this game and I was like, this Sixers team feels like there's a lot of like superstar-esque players on this team for them to be a 7 seed, so I was kind of shocked by that. But I mean, the Celtics it was like 13 for 47 from 3, which is a crazy stat that they, like, I mean, the first quarter of that game, you didn't think this, like, I was like, there's no way Boston wins this game based on how they're shooting right now, but then they do what Boston does. But I mean, this is going to be my backup too of talking about my did you see, and then coupled with the Orlando game of how they basically they scored 19 points in the second half too. So really just a crazy weekend for the NBA. But this was so I'm happy for you because nobody really wants to see the Celtics win. So
agreed, yeah.
So this is good.
Although it feels like Joel Embiid, for a guy who hasn't won anything, has somehow gotten unusually high on the villains that nobody roots for list.
I think. Because I just think he gets hurt a lot, and
that's not his fault.
But is he actually hurt? Like, what is the legitimacy of him being hurt? Because I feel like he just goes down so much, and you're like, oh, there goes Embiid, and then he gets up and he's fine. So I feel like that maybe is why like people are like, he's a little bit of maybe a little dramatic.
He's not. He might be dramatic, but he's not faking injuries. Because as a Sixers fan, I will tell you, he's not available for these playoff games. He's not faking anything. He's not playing. Yeah. But I don't understand why that makes him. I think it's the flopping. People accuse him of flopping.
Yeah,
all the
like
time.
I think people just think he might be a little dramatic.
Dramatic is I get that, and you know Jaylen Brown. And what was a bad look for him, called out Embiid for flopping after the game. Yeah. And, now look, Jason Tatum didn't play in game 7. That's a legitimate excuse. Embiid didn't play in the first 3 games for Philly. So no one wants to hear about Tatum missing 1 game. Boston was up 3-1.
Yeah.
Like you said, make more shots.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to cry about Joel Embiid.
And they were some bad. Their shot selection, not good. It was bad. It was ugly.
So I saw the stat that in the 4 losses, they were below 30% from 3. Mm-hmm. In the 3 wins, they were above 40%.
Makes sense.
It's a make shots league, as they say. But yeah, I'm super excited. Knicks 6. Now here's the thing though. Top 2 moment in my Sixers fandom. Mm-hmm. If they lose to the Knicks in like 5, then it don't really matter. Like it's cool. It's still a cool moment. But they've got the Knicks now, and they really probably got to win the series to make it really stand up. I mean, think about it. You can't have this great playoff series win if you're just going to roll over in the next round.
Yeah, and they might. The way the Knicks are playing right now,
Knicks are good.
It's possible.
I agree. I know.
Possible.
Whole different matchup too. I think maybe a little grittier defensively.
Yeah.
Brunson is not better than Brown or Tatum in terms of the top, but they have Karl Anthony Towns, which will make a difference.
Yeah.
Where are you on the Cavs right now? As a Cavs, I know that they
what do I? Yeah, I mean, last night was great. Last night was a great win for the Cavs. I'm feeling after Game 6, I was like, even the first quarter of last night's game, I was like, Cavs, I don't feel good about this. And then they ended up rallying in the fourth quarter, so I feel good. I mean, I think it's going to be the Knicks that come out of the East right now, but I think the Cavs do have a shot. Maybe I think I hope they'll roll through Detroit, but we'll see.
So you're not respecting Detroit at all as the 1 seed. I don't think it's wrong to do. I'm just asking.
I'm not disrespecting Detroit, but I think the Cavs, I think they can handle them. But I also thought the Cavs, I mean, the way the Cavs started this last series, I thought they were going to handle it just fine, and then it goes to Game 7. So
I think the Cavs got to win early because you got to convince Detroit you're still Detroit. They can't do anything in the postseason. Mm-hmm. If Detroit rolls in and takes the first 2 home games, then I think Detroit they get free and they start playing like the 1 seed, and then it becomes different. You beat them in Game 1, I think it's totally on for the Cavs for sure.
It'll be fun.
All right. That's going to do it for this show today. We're back again on Thursday, right? No Sabres this week? Yes. Sabres play on Wednesday.
Yep.
So we'll talk about Sabres Game 1 for sure and much more. For Rachel Albert, I'm Thad Brown. Thanks very much for watching the Endgame. If you're watching on Rochester First here live, the news is next. We'll see you again on Thursday.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.